thank you, 1,000 thanks to Olu and team and Cecilia and team for this amazing work. I think we are in great hands, is the message that I think we've all just heard. For the purpose of preparing for the spring, what I'm going to do actually is at some length review what we've learned from the survey of instructors that was developed by a part conducted by IR. And I'm going to share screen and start showing you some of the results. So this is the Tableau dashboard that all of you can see. Thank you very much to Apart for having developed the survey, Rick and Apart, and to IS&T for having developed this this Tableau dashboard with the results. It was a long survey. Those of you, the 500 of you who filled it out, know it was a long survey. Thank you for filling it out. The fact that it was a long survey means there's a really rich data set here, which is really worth looking into. I'm going to obviously just do a few highlights. And remember, this is a survey of instructors. The first question I want to highlight is thinking about this subject in the fall of 2020 relative to this subject in a pre-pandemic semester. How much of your time was required as a percentage of what you think would have been required in a normal semester? And the mean is 162%. So on average, people reported that they spent 1.6 times as much time on their teaching this past fall than in a normal time. The standard deviation is enormous, with 96. And that's because hidden in this 30% is two or more time, 30% of the respondents said twice as much time or more. It goes all the way up to 5 or 6 times as much. First message, which I think those who taught already know, but it's now documented, is that this was an enormous amount of work for all of the people who were teaching in the fall. So many thanks from MIT to all of those who were doing that work. Just to show you what you can do with this, you can break down by school. I won't do that here, although it is actually interesting. And there are some things that, in fact, I don't understand about the school, the way things break by school. So people should look at it. I won't do it here, but I'll show enrollment size. So you can split this out. For the classes with less than 10 students, it was only 138% of the effort. For the classes with 81 to 120 students, it was 194% of the effort. So the instructors in the larger classes reported spending more time. You can do this kind of breakout with all the questions. I just wanted to show it to you for a few. Then, okay, so with all that work, what did you teach? Compared to pre-pandemic versions, what percentage of the usual content were you able to include? And the mean here is 88%, which I think is amazing. This is really a testament to an enormous amount of work by many people. So again, this is reported by, in this case, 381 people who answered this question. There's a significant standard deviation, but a mean of 88%. And again, you can look at the breakdown by small classes, large classes, schools, et cetera. And then this is, I think, and perhaps even more interesting question, which is what percentage of the content was new this semester? That is not included when you would have taught this pre-pandemic. And about 20% of the content on average was new. Again, with a large standard deviation, there's the spread is larger than the mean. Where does this come from? Again, this one I will show the breakdown. So if I break down by class size there, if you look at this one, you'll see that the smallest classes have the largest percent of new content. So that's the first message, that in a lot of the smaller classes, people redesigned them to a very substantial degree. The larger classes, this mean is less. If you dive in further, which I won't do here, you'll see that many people were doing amazing things like sending out kits of parts, redesigning lab classes in ways that they could be done remotely. All of that effort translates into this answer here, where you see the percent of new content in our teaching this past semester. There are many other interesting things here. You can look and see what fraction of your colleagues have been developing videos. You can look and see what kinds of engagement mechanisms different people have been using. Casual conversation at the beginning and end of class, virtual office hours, one-on-one meetings, discussion boards. I wanted to look at techniques to make one point. This is the question, actually this is pre-pandemic times, you can look at that on your own time. So which of the following engagement techniques did you use in live online teaching? So synchronous Zooms teaching. And what I want to show you is that every one of these percentages went up from June to December. So I do think there's evidence in this that the teachers of MIT got better at creating engagement in the fall than we all were in the spring when this was brand new. And so if you pick any one of these, asking students for their questions via chat or the raised hands, it went up by a little bit. Calling on the whole class, small group discussions in breakout rooms, all of using polls, all of these methods of creating engagement, the fraction of people using them has gone up. You can also look at, again, there's a lot of interesting material in here. You can look and see what kinds of methods of assessment your colleagues were using, large fraction using problem sets or regular writing assignments, quite a small fraction using final exams this semester, as anticipated. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to ask Janet to share. We have a few slides, which I will actually be speaking to, but Janet is going to share the screen. That's the sort of discrete answer part of the survey. But in many ways, the richest part of this survey are the open box questions. And earlier this week, the answers to the open box questions went to all departments. Actually, sorry, let me just show you. These slides are, Janet, can you go back? These slides are going to be circulated to everyone. The link to the Tableau site is on the slides. The Tableau site is available to everyone. And I want to thank again Apart and Institutional Research for this, making all of this available. Next slide. So the survey has a really rich set and long set of open box questions. I've actually read every answer to every question from all of the people who did the survey. It's worth doing. You really get a sense of the experience of the instructors of MIT. I want to urge department heads to do the same. Every department head has received all the answers from the instructors in their department. It's really important to department heads, and you should pass them to whoever is the leadership team in your department who you consider to be appropriate to read these answers from your colleagues. People who filled out this survey were told that their answers were going to department leadership. And there's an enormous amount in here, and they're speaking to you. So please make sure you read what they've written. Also, department heads received the names of colleagues in their department who volunteered to help other colleagues. One of the questions that was asked was, would you volunteer to lead a small workshop to help your colleagues with a tool? All of those who volunteered, that volunteering has been passed to department heads. We think this will work best actually if it's informal, collegial conversation among colleagues within a department. If any department would like to organize something very slightly more formal and ask Janet to circulate the information so that colleagues from across MIT can come to an event in which someone is sharing their experience with a tool and how to use it best, please tell Janet, and she and I will circulate the information. But in many cases, I think the best path forward is with a light touch, informal collegial conversation within departments. And in fact, one of the things I'll mention later is there's a real appreciation among the survey respondents for this kind of interaction. Another reason why it's important for department heads to read this is that there are specific thank yous to department staff in here. In a number of cases, some instructor has written, give this person a raise. Now, we all know that we can't give raises right now because of the overall instructions from MIT, but I think it's important that department leadership see these kinds of remarks. There's a lot of appreciation for efforts of many, for colleagues helping colleagues, for Digital Learning Lab fellows, for department staff, for people from the Teaching and Learning Lab, IS&T, and Open Learning. The student workers, the learning technologists who are helping with Canvas were called out by many. Another general thing in the open box answers is something which boils down to, at a certain moment, I wish I could have asked for help. I think this highlights that my species, namely the teachers of MIT, of whom I am one, don't always ask for directions when we need them. So please do pass the word that, just as was said earlier in the context of vaccine-related things, there's an amazing team of people who are ready to answer your questions. You can access them either through Teach Remote, or if it's related to Canvas, through the Canvas support. The frontline team is actually from IS&T, but they pass the questions as appropriate, including to Cheryl Barnes in Open Learning, or Janet and her team in TLL, depending on the nature of the question. So I'm not going to speak in summarizing the OpenBox answers to questions about technology. There are some which are very constructive critiques that people have read and will take into account in making things better in small ways for the spring. There are others that boil down to how could I have asked for help at the moment when I needed it? And these are the ways to ask for help. Janet and her team have prepared a distillation of resources for the spring. There's a link to that. So what I'm going to do with the rest of my time is I'm actually going to summarize the answers to 8 OpenBox questions as I saw them. Let me say overall, before advancing the slide, that the extraordinary effort and the work it took comes through in the OpenBox questions, but so does a real appreciation for the fact that people were, in a unique way, focusing on learning and teaching and pedagogy and education, and thinking about how to do it well and how to create conditions in which students learn, thinking about it from first principles. And there was a real appreciation for the fact that we all were doing that, and that this will pay benefits in the long run. Can you share, next slide, please, Janet? Okay, so these are the first 5 of the questions I'll speak to. So in terms of challenges, you've already heard me say it's the effort, twice the work, Zoom exhaustion, no summer break, no break at all. That came through loud and clear, and it's important that department leadership hear from their faculty colleagues the specifics, in particular, juggling other pandemic-related demands, for example, but not limited to childcare. There's a lot of really honest description of the challenges that people faced. I've read them all, but in this case, it's actually much more important that department leadership do so. After that, the most common challenge that people describe boils down to some, in different ways, mentioning the limitations on the interactions that the teachers of MIT had with the students of MIT. Not getting to know students enough, not getting a feel for their experience, not engaging with them as well as they could, and a sense that the isolation that we're all experiencing is impacting both the teachers and the students. It comes through loud and clear. I will say that there were a minority, to be fair to people who gave this kind of answer, there were a minority when asked about challenges said, oh, I had no real challenge, everything went smoothly. I had a very pleasant experience. That's a direct quote. So there were colleagues who answered that way, and in fairness to them, I'm reporting that, but they were a minority. Many people said, we've learned that virtual and asynchronous teaching and learning are not equivalent to the real thing. What we're missing is the engagement. I'll read one quote. There were no major challenges that outweighed the others. It was more like death by 1,000 cuts. Every task, including taking care of kids, managing a research group, and everything to do with teaching, took longer. It adds up to overwhelming. It was hard to balance without losing a bit of sanity. That was one direct quote, but I thought emblematic. And I wanted to draw a lesson from this, which is that the fact that everything is taking longer for us, the teachers, everything's taking longer for the students too. We've heard that from the students in many ways, but I think about your own experience as teachers and reflect on what it means for the experience of the students. A piece set that you think is the right length in normal times, it will take everyone, it's going to take them longer now. Doing a test or a quiz, it will take people longer. Everything is taking people longer to do. That's what we're hearing from the teachers of MIT, and it's true for the students also. And so think about your own experience and reflect on what it means as you calibrate what you ask your students to do in the spring. Okay, next question, sort of from the flip side, what are you most proud of? Some people said survival. After we get past responses like, what are you most proud of? Like that to what are you most proud of? it's amazing how by far the largest class of answers, what are you most proud of? The answer came back, my students, in a whole variety of ways. I'm most proud of, what made me most proud was the feedback I got from my students. What made me most proud was the quality of work of my students. The performance on quizzes showed an impressive level of understanding and commitment to learning. They were more engaged than ever. I had better attendance at the end of the semester than ever before. I found that I connected in meaningful ways with my students and created a supportive atmosphere. That's what I'm most proud of. I made my class more interactive. I gave oral quizzes, connected with students one-on-one. So those faculty who had that sense that that's what they were most proud of, and that was the most common category of answers. I think this resonates with what we've heard from the students. The student course evaluations this semester were not the standard type, so they cannot be compared to previous semesters. But if you look at some of the questions, this is from the students. Satisfied with my overall learning experience, it was 6.23 out of 7, averaged over all of MIT. My instructor supported my learning, 6.39 out of 7. Learning objectives for the subject were met. This is according to the students in the student survey, 6.33 out of 7, averaged across MIT. So the students put up with all of this. Again, this is actually a quote from one of the instructors. What am I most proud of? It's that the students put up with all of this and we all pulled together. That's one direct quote, but I think it's the message of the answers to this question. What the faculty who chose to answer this question often focused on being most proud of was their students. And I think it's reciprocated in the students' assessment of their teaching. So it was a very tough haul, but it pulled people together as opposed to pushing people apart. And I think we can all be proud of that. I will say that at a more technical level, what are you most proud of? People mentioned, again, things that created engagement, breakout rooms, use of the chat, office hours, office hours, office hours. What resources would have been helpful? To the deans out there, everyone wants more TAs. I'm sure you already know that. And that relates to the fact that everyone, many people appreciated how valuable the work of their TAs was in the past fall semester. In fact, one of the silver linings I'll mention in a second was that the revelation of using undergrad TAs and how they were so great at creating engagement. There was also, what would have been helpful, informal faculty meetings and open conversations among colleagues, requested by many. This is actually happening, I know, in many departments, but it's appreciated and it's needed. And a lot of resources, a lot of the people who answered the question about resources actually said the resources that were made available were simply amazing. Kudos to IS&T, to the teams, to Janet's team and to Cheryl's team. There were also specific questions about improvements to resources, which indeed will be taken into consideration. I will just quote one response to what resources would have been helpful, and then move on. Time off, a raise, an actual break at any point in the semester, recognition that every single instructor and every single student was going absolutely above and beyond every single day. And that is an emblematic response. Again, keep that in mind as you think about your expectations of your students for the spring. Silver linings. There were actually many. The first silver lining that I will highlight was various people said, silver lining, it was safe. Got to keep that in mind. Why did we do this? For public health and safety, and it seems to have worked. Thank you, of course, to Cecilia and team, Olu and team, many others. This was highlighted in this way. No commute. Many people commented on that as a silver lining. This whole experience brought out everyone's sense of humor, tolerance, and good spirit. That's a quote. Many people said silver lining was we got Canvas and we got Gradescope. People look at Gradescope and Canvas and say we're not going back. These are much better tools than we've ever had before. Online materials and videos that people made out of necessity but will be able to reuse, pointed to as a silver lining. Many of the people who, like me, like to lecture at a chalkboard, at standing at a blackboard, um, um, commented that actually doing that style of lecturing from an iPad had the benefit that your boards, quote unquote, from the iPad could be saved, could be shared, could be edited and improved, could be looked at by the students a week later, can be reused. This was pointed to as a silver lining. The Zoom chat. We heard from many directions that students, for example, shy students, but I think all students, but including shy students, many people noted this, are more willing to ask questions in the chat than by raising hands. Guest lectures, real diverse group of experts brought in. There was one class which brought in 32 guest lectures over the course of the semester in panels of 5. And that focus on polls, breakout rooms, all the ways of creating engagement. These silver linings can't compare to the value of in-person education, but they're real, and we'll have to find ways to benefit from them in the future. What will you do differently? It's all about engagement, the answer to that question. It's work more on encouraging engagement. It's also about doing less. Many people said, if I did it again, I would teach less material, slow down, reduce content by 30%. They commented on the fact that people were taking twice as long to watch the videos as the time of the videos because they were going back and rewatching and studying, and that this is a good thing, but it means people are taking more time. Also, a lot about planning for more collaborative assignments, fewer quizzes, but other people said they wanted to do more quizzes, less PowerPoint, more group work in class, more breakouts, so more engagement in a variety of senses, and slow things down a bit. Describe modifications. I'm out of time, so I will skip this, but I've given you a sense actually of the modifications that people describe by what I said about silver linings, so I'll skip that one. Engagement and community building activities. Some of them I've already mentioned, but there's an enormous variety of others. Some people use Minecraft, some people use Discord, Piazza, Slack. Other people mailed out cookies. Other people had Zoom coffee breaks, Zoom coffee hours for their students, Zoom lunches with their students. A lot more one-on-one interactions with students than in normal times. Many more students coming to office hours, easier for students to come to office hours this way for a variety of reasons, some logistical and some psychological. Watching movies together, icebreakers, poster sessions in gather.town. How would you change your assessments? What would you change if you did it differently? Some people said I would have more frequent quizzes, some people have said less. There was a lot of appreciation for weekly quizzes, but others felt that created more stress. I'll note that the other advantage of many lower stakes assessments is reducing risks on the academic integrity side. A lot of people spoke about group projects, collaborative assignments, open notes exams, requiring students to explain their answers, oral exams, peer evaluations, asking students to make up good questions for the course, video presentations, and then less is more and patience is a virtue. Again, direct quotes. And last, important to provide clear guidelines for class participation in classes where class participation is part of what is assessed. So I am out of time, but that gives you a sense, and I've done so in a way which was quite deliberately forward-looking, even though everything I said came directly from the wealth of information that 500 people provided about their experience this fall. I've tried to summarize it in a way that constitutes advice for the spring.
Krishna, thank you. And thanks to you for your leadership through this whole thing with this focus on teaching and learning in particular, and to Janet and Cheryl and all that Mark Silas and his team do to support the technology side of this as well. Obviously a group effort, but you've been a great leader for it throughout, so thank you.